So I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. I found a lot of epidemiological maps on the University of Kentucky Diagnostic Lab's website, and I just found them very interesting to see what diseases were being reported or found in Kentucky and in how many numbers. And I just enjoyed going through those maps, and I think they could be very helpful. Today we've got Dr. Jacqueline Smith with us, and I'm very happy to have someone with so much experience in this area. She received her bachelor's in agriculture from Berea College, then a master's in dairy science from Wisconsin, and then a PhD in animal science from the University of Kentucky, and then was trained in epidemiology at Johns Hopkins. And then she's been working at UK for the last 20 years. Her main interest is preventing the spread of disease while developing new methods of tracking and surveillance of common health conditions in our animal populations. So I think she's a perfect person to talk to about this interesting maps that we found, and I think we'll get a lot of good information. So from here, let's start our interview with Dr. Smith. So one of the first things we were talking a little bit before I start recording. Could you tell us what the diagnostic lab does before we get into the talking about some of the maps and stuff, and what maybe the goals and how the diagnostic lab wants to help Kentucky?
Well, so there are two diagnostic labs actually in the state of Kentucky, and that's the UK Veterinary Diagnostic Lab here in Lexington. And then there's Breathitt Veterinary Center, which is affiliated with Murray State out in the western part of the state. We were mandated and established in 1971 or two.
Before my time, yeah.
Yeah. Before my time, I was still drooling at that time. We were put here in place to serve the community, and
Hmm.
we were originally put in place by Frankfurt and not associated with the university. It
Oh,
was
okay.
it was associated with USDA, state
Okay, yeah.
agriculture, and I think it was the late 70s. It was actually turned over and became a part of the university,
Oh, that's
a
interesting.
land grant institution. And our goal here is to help producers and veterinarians and improve animal health in the state of Kentucky. That's kind of the generic umbrella.
Yeah.
The reality is we've evolved over the years. Yeah, we do help monitor and try to improve animal health.
Yeah, primarily around Lexington, there's a lot of horses. So you
Yeah.
definitely see a lot of horses, but other species as well.
Yes, I mean, it's the horse capital of the world, basically. So, because of our location, we do see more horses than anything. On the upside, that makes us some of the best at diagnostics in equine.
Yeah,
But we have a very large amount of cattle in the state.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
the biggest producing cattle state east of the Mississippi. So we see a significant amount of cattle. Now, mainly here in Lexington, we see beef cattle.
mm-hmm,
It's because that's the population around here. The western part of the state, they see more dairy cattle than we
yeah,
do.
yeah,
But we're here to educate and help and improve health. The other thing is, the reality is if something bad happens,
mm-hmm,
say a disease outbreak, possible quarantine situation, the good thing about being associated with the university is we have pots of money put
mm-hmm.
back for those emergencies to help send out professionals. There was a case maybe 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We had a cattle farmer that his field abutted up to an abandoned field that no one had used in probably 30 years.
Hmm.
His cattle had broken through the fence, and this field had been used as a dumping ground.
Mm-hmm.
And his cattle had gotten in and broken some old glass bottles, and
Oh,
they had consumed some of it.
uh-oh.
So within 24 hours, he had some animals dead, and
Mm-hmm.
myself, toxicologist, the extension veterinarian, we were out there within 24 hours and
Yeah.
taking samples and testing animals and, trying and working with the extension service, USDA and the state veterinary office, to get that taken care of,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, luckily stuff like that doesn't happen, but when it does, we're able to respond quickly,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, in addition to that, we do seminars for veterinarians for
Mm-hmm.
continuing education.
I've been to some of those. Those are
Yeah.
always helpful.
And a recent thing, well, I guess not too recent, we've been doing it about 5 years now. There's a newer veterinary school in Tennessee at Lincoln Memorial
Yes.
University. Instead of fourth year students doing everything on campus, they
Yeah.
farmed them out all over,
Yeah. Yeah.
for their last year. So all of those students come through here now and they do their 2 week pathology rotation through the lab here at UK now.
Yeah, I feel like must be getting some good stuff. I remember at Auburn, my pathology rotation, we did stuff and there was a lot to do, but I would imagine the volume at UK would be more.
Yes.
Yeah, the students that come through, they've always, yep, I'm going to UK next or whatever. So I think that's a good part for them as well, because we have a bunch of students come through my clinic as well. So
Yeah.
I think I do like that practical side of that.
Well,
Uh,
I think it's a good thing, because they're being exposed to actual cases, not
yes.
theoretical cases. And they're working with, we've got 8 boarded pathologists right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
We restarted the residency program, so we have a
Okay.
resident pathologist.
Excellent.
We'll have another resident starting this summer. So, the reality is you're working with some of the most educated veterinarians
Hmm.
around,
Yeah.
and I think that is very important for students to be exposed to that.
Yeah.
You Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah,
I think you're still help. At least whenever I've called, the vets there have always helped me out. So I assume you're helping everyone else too. So,
well, we try, the reality is, when did you go into practice?
2010.
Okay. So previous to 2010, so 2001, 2002, I'm sure you've heard of MRLS, male
Hmm.
reproductive loss syndrome.
Yes.
It's because of that I have a job.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Previous to MRLS, I mean, the lab was still here.
Yeah.
Pathology, diagnostic testing, no epidemiology.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, One of the things that came out of MRLS was they established the epidemiologist position.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been my whole career is, how do we monitor what's coming in
Yeah.
and set up a system to evaluate what we're seeing and saying, hey, this is a normal, typical year in Kentucky,
Yeah.
or yay, we're seeing less of something. That's awesome. Or
Or we've got a problem.
we got a problem.
Yeah. Which from that is kind of why I reached out to you. You've made a lot of maps, which I'll include those links on my podcast information and stuff. But there's a bunch of maps showing the statistics of various diseases and other things in Kentucky. And I found it very informative on the website. And maybe not everyone would go through for an hour or two and just look at the numbers and stuff. But that was something I'm like, get home from work, I'm like, this is really cool. I'm going to look through this. But could you explain those maps and kind of why I assume that was kind of your idea
Yeah.
to get those up, but how are they compiled and how they're kind of set up to?
Well, we hired a company back in 2005, 2006. The idea my boss and I had is if we could kind of have a little generic map that
Hmm.
updated every morning and showed what we're seeing here at the lab every 30 day for the last 30 days.
Okay. Yeah.
And every morning, say about 5 a.m. before people got up, before people got started at work, it would update, so that
Okay.
you kind of had a moving window. You
Yeah.
always saw the last 30 days. It worked really well,
Mm-hmm.
but some of the comments were like, well, I see what's been going on, but I wish I could see what's going on, say specifically with just one species, or I wish
Okay.
I could
Yeah.
just look at one disease.
Instead of every, because that's a lot of
That's
information.
a lot of information.
Yeah.
And, you couldn't really filter it or download it or get a whole lot of information out of it. Unfortunately, I had a health episode and had to go to the hospital and was off work for some time to recover. And well, I get bored easily. So I went back and took some classes online while I was stuck at home recuperating. And instead of, paying a company a lot of money, significant amounts of money, I learned how to write the code to make these maps myself.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, our IT department taught me how to embed it into our website.
No.
So it
Yeah.
was it was a joint effort, but I'm like, it'd be really cool if we could produce all the maps we wanted
Mm-hmm.
without costing 20,000 per map.
Yeah.
And, also if something was wrong, we could troubleshoot it ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how it kind of started. And then it snowballed from there. And, one of the first maps we did was abortions in
Mm-hmm.
horses because,
Mm-hmm.
that's a big ticket item
Yeah. In
where we're
Kentucky.
at.
Yeah.
And we put that on the website. Then what we did was we rebuilt in-house the 30-day moving window map
Mm-hmm.
so that
Mm-hmm.
we could customize it. Dr. Bob Stout, who was the state vet at that time, he's like, Jackie, he said, I love it. He said, I get up first thing in the morning. He said, I pour me a cup of coffee and I look at that map, what's going on in the last 30 days. He said, I do it every morning. I said, well, I'm glad you like it, Dr. Stout, and he said, it's like checking the pulse of the state.
Yeah.
Like, hey, that's
That's
great feedback.
yeah.
Then we had, a guy over in animal science. He's an extension guy. He's like, I really like your maps. He said, and I love that you're starting to put out some cattle maps,
Yeah. Yeah.
for different diseases. He said, what I'd love to see is, as an extension guy, he said, can you put one up there that shows like where we're getting nutritional deficiencies,
Mm-hmm.
selenium, copper, anything like that? And I was like, well, I don't know. Let's give it a try. And,
Mm-hmm.
so I went in and wrote the code. Hey, it worked. So
Yeah.
now we've got that up there,
So,
and
so are you just pulling this from all the I assume you have a database of all the cases. Are you just pulling it directly from your cases and
yeah. So
yeah.
we have our own in-house servers
Mm-hmm.
because I'm going to tell you, we produce an obscene amount of material.
Yeah.
Every case has multiple test results, and if it
Mm-hmm.
was a necropsy case, it's got comments from the pathologist, and if it was sent in by the vet and they had done testing, they would send in the results they had, and, so basically all of that data is captured in the database and then stored on our server system. And what I do is when I write the query is I tell it to first filter down by species
Mm-hmm.
and I either look for a specific test code or a test name.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's a necropsy, I tell it to look for a disease name or a comment.
Associate it with, yeah.
Yeah, and then what it does is it finds all of this in our database and I give it date parameters.
Yeah.
And basically you transfer that over to a map because, if you
Mm-hmm.
pick zip code, we can pin it to a county.
Yeah.
And then we produce everything and it renders the map.
Yeah.
And so when you click on a map link, it takes maybe a half a second to 2 seconds, depending on how much data is
Yeah.
in the map. And that's because it actually pulls it. You're
Yeah.
not you're not getting old data. You're
It's
getting the latest, greatest.
up to date. That's nice to know. Yeah, I wondered how frequently they update it. I saw some were updated at certain times. I was like, oh, that's neat to know. It's real time. Yeah.
Yeah. We get it as close to real time as possible, because let's be honest, veterinarians, producers, if you're looking for that information, you need it.
You need
And
it now. Yeah.
you need it now.
Are you pulling from the Breathitt lab too, or just
We we are not currently. The reality is it can be done.
mm-hmm.
We have run test cases. Big issue is at this moment, Breathitt does not have a full-time IT person.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Their IT stuff is farmed out to a support company.
Yeah.
It could be done. The issues right now is money and time,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it can be done. Some proof of that is we have a rabies map on
Yes.
our website. The reality is, here in Kentucky, rabies is under the purview of state public health veterinarian.
Yes. Yeah.
So Kentucky has a state vet and we have a state public health vet.
Mm-hmm.
And rabies is under the public health vet. The issue there is they're understaffed,
Yeah.
not a lot of resources. So it was about 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The state public health veterinarian asked if, if we would become the official repository of all of the
Mm.
records they had.
Okay. Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's set it up. So, our rabies map, you can go back to January 1st of 1989.
I noticed that, and I was
And
like, wow, that's a lot of records.
that's a lot of data. And the kicker is it gets updated every 30 days. So,
Mm-hmm.
actually, day before yesterday, they sent me the reports for December, and
Mm-hmm.
that was added to the map.
Yeah.
We're halfway through January now, so I expect in 3.5 weeks, I will get this month's reports.
Mm-hmm.
So the results are from animals that have been tested in Frankfurt at the
Mm-hmm.
public health lab. It does include rabies testing from the Breathitt Veterinary Lab out at
Mm-hmm.
Murray State. Uh, Quarterly, typically, we get data ported in there from Kentucky Fish and Wildlife because they do their
Oh,
own testing of
okay.
wildlife.
Yeah.
And typically twice a year, I'll get a big report from USDA at the federal level of their
Okay.
testing.
So you're really pulling from a
Yes.
lot of places in Kentucky.
Yeah. And, the reality is there's a lot of reasons they're very picky about rabies testing. Our natural terrestrial reservoir for rabies in Kentucky is skunks.
Mm-hmm.
However, next to us, Virginia, West Virginia, terrestrial reservoir is raccoons. So there's a lot of enhanced testing on the eastern border to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that our reservoir is not getting flipped, that we're
Yeah.
not getting a bunch of raccoons crossing over with rabies. And every summer they use helicopters and fixed wing aircraft to drop, you know, bait that has, you know,
Rabies vaccine.
rabies vaccine
Yeah.
in it. It really is, a joint effort, to produce all this data and make it available publicly.
Yeah, yeah, and I like that it's out there that people can see, and I didn't realize how much you were pulling from, so that's really neat to see. Now, I'm not saying this to say you need to do more work, but do you have plans in the future, or does this link to some of any of the national sites? Because I've noticed, like the CAPC vet, there's various places that try to put out some maps.
Yeah.
Um,
So here's the interesting thing. The CAP website for parasites, I'm not really sure where they're pulling that from.
I wondered that as well.
For all I know, they could be, downloading some of our data that's generic and including it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think anybody listening to this should know we made a concerted effort. We want to get the information out there, but everything on our maps, it's on the county level.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't violate any client confidentiality because you don't know the veterinarian that was used.
Yeah.
The information's not available, and you don't get a specific street address where this animal is located.
Yeah.
All of the information you're getting is this animal had this disease or this positive test in this county at this
In
time.
this, yeah.
You
Which,
know,
which is I think helpful, and I don't know if I'd want more than
right,
that. I did wonder because you can't catch everything. And
right,
it's like when I was looking at I think it was roundworms on the CAPC vet, and I'm like, who's reporting? I don't report every case of roundworms I see. It's
huh,
just, why would I do that?
yeah,
I was curious where that came from, and when I see something coming from UK and now seeing where it comes in from, I'm like, oh, this is fairly official stuff, not just someone saying, yep, roundworms. I saw 30 cases this
yeah.
week, whatever,
See, that was the thing when we were first setting this up. We kind of had to restrict the data to the lab
Yes,
or another official lab. And the reason we did that is, we know the integrity of our data.
exactly.
We have to maintain accreditation and proficiency standards.
Yes.
Other, you know, veterinarians work really hard and they're very good at what they do. But a veterinarian saying, I saw this case of Yonis
Mm-hmm.
versus, well, I have positive test result from Yonis from this lab. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's a difference. We have a little bit more leeway
Yes.
to uh, say there's a disease
Right.
and be treat, but not have a firm diagnosis.
Well, and we've had conversations about this with, vet students and stuff like that. Anytime I'm talking to a large group of vet students, I'm like, how many of you guys are going to use IDEX or Antec?
Mm-hmm.
And it's always like 90% of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not surprised. They both have a courier service. It's easy.
And that's yeah, and that's where my clinic, because I used to send more to UK,
Yeah,
love the services, but I couldn't. I still send cattle stuff because Antec and IDEX they're too expensive.
yeah,
But cattle people get more upset because sometimes I tell them I'll get the results back depending on the post office.
yeah,
And of course, the last person I said to worked at the post office, and they said, "Oh, it'll be fine." And I'm like, "Okay,
yeah,
hasn't worked out 100% for me, but probably will be." But
yeah.
it's yeah, it's and there's a financial side that these
There
big
is.
labs are, and I assume those big labs are not talking with you and saying, "Hey, here's our information too," or
No.
you know,
Well, it just is what it is. It's the
yeah, yeah,
reality. We are not allowed to offer a courier service,
hmm
because we're part of the university. So there's financial regulations and everything
yeah.
like that. It just isn't feasible. And that's a shame because I think we could provide more, and I think we would be used more if we could do that.
I would
So,
I would say what I've learned or noticed from Antec is who I use is over the years I feel like they have tried to emulate what I saw UK doing, much more customer service. Here's how we can help you with these results, which I remember having this conversation. I'm like, I have to switch over for financial reasons, but I want to be able to talk to them because they have helped me through lots of cases.
exactly.
And it's kind of the hard reality, and for the reporting, it's the data that is put out there too.
Well, I always tell my students, I know you're going to use IDEX or Antec.
Hmm.
This is how you make a living. You've got to be fiscally responsible. I get it. But wherever you end up in your career, find your closest diagnostic lab. You know, if you can, throw them a case every now and then, just so that you
Yeah,
build a relationship with them, so that if something really bad happens,
you
you
can.
know who to call, and they've got resources to help.
Yeah,
Because, you know, except for the whole courier thing, we're cheaper, we're better.
You are, and I know
Right.
that it's really the courier thing.
Yeah,
Is what it came down to and stuff.
it is.
Um,
But it's a shame. I wish we could offer that. But that's part of it. Us doing that job for less cost, you know, make sure that we get cases in here, because that's kind of the surveillance of animal health in
yeah,
Kentucky,
of the state, and
you
it's
know?
it's also a way that I mean I'm a taxpayer, and
Yeah,
some of my money goes to fund UK, so I might as well use it.
exactly.
So there's a few things there. You kind of already answered one of my questions was, are the diagnostic labs reporting this information to the state and the USDA? But it almost sounds like it's the other way around. It's all compiling here, at least in
Well,
Kentucky, which is kind of
I,
neat.
I'm going to be honest with you. UK, we are typically one of the smallest labs in the US,
Mm-hmm.
and we have one of the biggest caseloads.
Yeah.
Now, we average between 3 and 4 thousand necropsies a year,
That
and we
moving.
literally do over 250,000 diagnostic tests
Yeah.
a year. And the thing is, we've looked at this over the last 15 years. The reality is what we are seeing here at the lab is probably only 10 to 15% of what's actually going on out in the
Yeah.
population.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives you an idea. If you're looking at our numbers, you multiply that, that's what's
Bye.
going on.
Yeah.
And, the where you're using Antec,
Mm-hmm.
that's that's a problem with a lot of the testing in the western part of the state. We don't get a lot from out there unless it's typically something to do with horses.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not going to Antec or IDEX, it's going to the Breathitt lab,
Yeah.
you know. So that's why when you look at our maps, most of the western part of the state is going to look empty,
Yeah.
because they don't use us in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
whatever reason. You know, luckily, you know, we've still got Louisville and stuff like that that for some reason prefers to use us. And the thing is, we were the first ones to offer these maps live with live
Yeah.
data. If you go look at the CDC, they have maps, but they
Yes.
are static. They're in a PDF. You can
Yeah.
look at it and it doesn't change. You cannot interact with it at all like ours.
And it's not updating and
It's not updating. And the thing is when the CDC puts out, they'll put out a new map
Mhm.
probably in March or April
Mhm.
for rabies cases for the state of for the United States.
Yes.
But that's because they had to wait till 2023 ends
To
and
get,
compile all the information from
yeah.
every state and then put it out, and they won't update it again for a year.
Yeah. Which they have tons more data,
They
but
do. They do. And I admit that. But the reality is if a small lab like us
can do what you're
can
doing.
train one person and we can consistently update that information every month
Yeah.
from outside entities with our limited resources, I don't understand why the CDC can't produce something like that, because they've got money.
Yeah.
Compared to them, we're broke,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. Because the states are probably reporting to the CDC monthly,
Mhm.
not yearly. I'm like, hey, people can click on it and they can see what the species, what the test result was when it came in. Was there a human exposure?
Yeah.
You know, basic information that is needed. And some of the biggest responses we've gotten is actually from the health departments
Oh, yeah.
because they're like,
This is great. They
somebody's
can.
worried about rabies. I just go and look on your map and see what's going on in our county. Like,
And
hey,
that real-time data seems, when I saw that, and now that I realize how frequently it's updating, because I've been like, how can I put these maps? Do I look them up each morning, or whatever the case? But I mean, I think that's awesome, and it just goes to, well, I mean, congratulations on everything you've done, because
thank you.
it's an undertaking. Because I looked around for other similar things,
Yeah,
and I wasn't finding it.
yeah.
And I'm like, it's nice to say that there are unique things to Kentucky, and we're doing a good job at something.
Well, we are. This is, at least currently, this is unique to us. And how often do you hear Kentucky leading the way in something good?
Yeah,
You know,
unfortunately, not as much as I'd like, because there's a lot of good things in Kentucky.
yeah,
And I would say the diagnostic lab is definitely one of them.
thank you.
I'm
Uh,
I
and
might be biased, but
well, the thing is, anytime I show these maps to our fourth year DVM students, every one of them, it's kind of like this light clicks on in their head, and they're like,
yeah,
"Wait a minute, why doesn't my state have this?"
yeah, yeah,
You know, and honestly, if I can find $2 million, I need $2 million. And
yeah.
everybody, why do you need $2 million? Okay, here's my drink.
Hmm.
$1 million. There's 48 other labs like the diagnostic lab here in Lexington in the US.
Yeah.
Give me $2 million and I'll take one of my IT guys and we will go and visit every lab,
And
install the software, get them up and
train.
running, give them a 3-day crash course on how to get this stuff set up.
Hmm.
Give us 6 months to do that. And now you've got every lab on the same page.
That would be
Now, that
incredibly.
solves the problem that you could visit each state lab's website and see what you're seeing from us, right?
Yeah,
That's great, but that's not my ultimate goal.
yeah.
What's my ultimate goal? Every bit of them, port them into a central location and let you pull it up for a national map.
That, but gee, if maybe someone from the CDC is listening with money, they should
Yes,
reach out
you
to you.
know, and they're all like, hey, that would be cool. And I'm like, yeah, think about this. You could actually set it so that you could watch where disease starts and how it moves through the entire US.
Yeah,
If we're capturing cases on a daily or weekly basis.
yeah, yeah.
But the side benefit to that is, what if some disease pops up around the border
And
or pops up in a place that is never ever shown up?
yeah,
You've got an early detection system for potential bioterrorism or anything else as a
yeah,
side effect.
yeah. And I mean, and you could, even certain things, you could key it into the computer, watch for
Yes,
a EIA outbreak or,
exactly. And that's the thing, you can set the base level on this on my end.
mhm,
And if we're starting to get statistically significantly more
yeah,
cases, it's a statistical increase. I don't have to wait till I get to work to turn everything on and look at it. It
yeah,
emails me a report.
hmm,
So that as soon as I groggily wake up in the morning, I'm struggling from the coffee, I've got an alert on my phone. It's like, okay, it's going to be one of those days at work. I got to look
yeah,
at this and this. But it lets you focus exactly where you need to put your attention.
yeah,
That would be the thing about a national map is it's going to let you know where you need to position your resources,
yeah.
say an outbreak starts.
Yeah, and just having someone being able to see that and get
Yeah,
warnings out and be
yeah,
like, "Hey, this is happening at,
exactly.
whatever area," and
Well, it also kind of clues you in on we're seeing changes in disease, and I
yeah,
really think it's directly related to weather changes.
hmm,
You know, you had mentioned you looked at our anaplasma map,
Yes.
okay? And we'd seen a spike in June and October, right?
Yeah.
And October made sense to you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. The reality is, most cases, typical,
Mm-hmm.
historically, we always see the most cases mid to late summer. So June to September is usually the heaviest period for
Okay.
anaplasma.
Yeah.
You're going to still see cases in October and November and stuff, but usually those cases are decreasing.
Decreasing a little more.
Yeah. And
Okay.
then, it's usually the lowest, say, in December to February.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you may start seeing a few cases ticking up here in the spring, but
Yeah.
it's that mid to late summer that's typical. For the previous 20 years, that was the case.
Mm-hmm.
You saw your increases June to September. By the time October rolled around, the cases are decreasing.
Yeah.
Well, this year it's shifted this past year.
Mm-hmm.
It's going June through mid to late October now. And
Okay.
now it's starting to decrease November and December. And I
Interesting.
think a lot of that is because lately we've been having
Warmer.
warmer early winter.
Yeah.
You know?
Ticks
Uh,
are moving around at different times.
yeah, and
I'm always a little off, you know. I'm
yeah,
on fashion trends too, so you
yeah.
know.
Well, it, it's weird when you talk about epidemiology, and we're doing this spatial analysis with the maps and stuff. You know, if you do something long enough, you kind of get that idea of the typical pattern.
Yes.
And all of that's getting thrown out the door the last couple of years and getting changed, you know.
Well, and I think I see that on a basic level too,
Yeah.
because when I grew up, fleas and flea and tick medicine, you know, everyone stopped in the winter.
Oh, yeah.
And now I'm like, you can't do that.
No,
It's not working anymore.
no.
And clients are like, well, it's winter. I'm okay. And I'm like, well, but I'm finding fleas and ticks on your animals. You need to stay on these preventatives. And they're like, well, why is that? Are the preventatives not working? I'm like, well, no, they are working, but things have changed. We're seeing them more. You have to keep applying them. And I think that goes to lots of diseases, not just that.
Oh, it does. So when I first started at UK, I was actually working on campus, running an applied physiology lab.
Hmm.
And I left campus to come work here at the lab. One of the first things I noticed was like, why do we have so many cases of blackleg? I
Mm.
mean, there's a vaccine. It's dirt cheap.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I did in my new job here was we sent out an email to all our veterinary clients. Hey, we're seeing an increase in blackleg. Remind your clients to vaccinate.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, cases had dropped 80%.
Just
Yay, the
because we're,
system works.
yeah.
And then the next year, they all came back. So I actually called, I think it was 21 cattle farms.
Yeah.
So, you know, you weren't having a problem, but now you're having a problem with blackleg. What's going on? Is there something we can do to help?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have a problem with blackleg last year, so I didn't vaccinate this year. I
Yes.
saved this amount of money.
Heard that a lot. Yeah.
Well, you got to vaccinate every year.
Hmm.
You know, you didn't save money because now you've got 3 head of cattle dead.
Yeah.
You know,
That adds up. Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Prevention. I mean, these maps can help with prevention so
yes,
much. And maybe that's something we can use to say, look at this map. It comes up every time. You need to be prepared.
exactly.
Um,
That's been a nice byproduct of the maps.
yeah.
It's we've got a group, of students that come through here that can use this data, and they can, calculate their own little 2 by 2 tables and stuff like that. And, it's kind of just a little educational tool. But then I found out a few years ago, we've got schools at Johns Hopkins that
Hmm.
are using this as a, live data stream
Oh, good. Yeah.
or creating problems for their graduate students.
To work through. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Nice
we
to
had,
know your work's being used.
yeah, well, we had a little hiccup here at the lab early December. The maps were offline for less than 24 hours. We got an email from a panicked professor in Norway.
Oh, no.
He's like, we're using this to track thus and so disease in horses,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, wait, what? You're not even using this for students? And they're like, no, we're interested in what's going on in nocardiaform placentitis.
Oh, that's,
And
yeah.
we check your website every day and you need to fix your maps. And I'm like,
Give me a minute.
I'm like, at this point, they've been down 6 hours. We're working on it, and
Yeah, it's the internet and combining everything. Because I mentioned when we were talking before that I think most of my listeners are not from my local area. So it's always funny or interesting when I get a call or an email from someone. I'm like, you're not nowhere near me, and it's just a like, where did this come from?
yeah,
But I enjoy watching it too and seeing who's listening because I'm like, I wonder what they're getting from this.
yeah,
It's fun to
yeah.
see.
But, well, hopefully you're not going to get a panicked email from Norway and be like, hey, we saw your video, but we couldn't hear the sound.
Yeah. I hope not. Yeah.
Yeah, but
So I was going to ask too. I started practicing in 2010, and I felt like there was a lot of maps starting around that time.
yeah,
But it seemed like 2010, 2013 was when a lot of maps started the data. Was
yeah,
there a reason for those time periods I noticed, or?
there is. So when I started here at the lab in 2006, we were on a very old lab information management system,
Hmm,
LIMS, that no one else in the country used.
yeah.
It's old DOS-based system. It
Hmm,
worked, but it was clunky and hard to get data out of.
yeah.
In late 2009, this lab followed suit with, I think, 15 other diagnostic labs, and we switched over to a new program called USA LIMS. So we tested that for several months
Hmm.
and then went live with it January 1st of 2010. Most of the maps start in 2010 because that's as far back we can go for the data without having to
Get to the
uh,
old
sit
system.
down and crack into the old and make sense of this
Yeah.
DOS-based data that's like, what is this?
Yeah.
I've got IT guys that were born after DOS was dead. So
Yeah.
now some of the maps though that start at 2013 instead of 2010 is because the section either changed the testing criteria
Okay.
or they changed what they considered the gold standard,
Hmm.
or there was some sort of change. A lot of this stuff, they use these diagnostic kits from like Sigma or these other
Hmm.
scientific places. In 2013, I know we had two tests that they changed the cutoff values for what was considered positive versus.
Oh, okay.
So the testing protocol changed and the testing standards changed. And we're like, if we have two different sets of data on the same map, people are going to get confused really quickly.
Yeah.
So since this is the new way we're doing it, when we're not counting the old way, we decided to cut the old stuff off
Hmm.
just to keep it streamlined and everything's on the same platform. And you don't get a frantic call because suddenly, hey, what you're showing this year doesn't make any sense compared to 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. So
Yeah.
it's
It
just
sounds
easier.
sounds like you're making sure the data is consistent and
Yeah,
reliable, which is
yes.
good to know. I mean, yeah.
Well, it's a bigger job than I expected when
Mhm.
you've got, when you've got section heads, that are PhDs like I am, and they also have DVMs, and they're like, I want to change the name of this test because this name doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, no. And they're like, why not? And I said, because if we change the name, it will be effective at this date.
Yeah.
It's not a problem to go in and change
In
the
the
query that pulls the data,
yeah,
but it's not going to pull all the old data
yeah,
if it's a historical map, because
yeah,
you now suddenly change the name. It's going to be hard for reporting and digging up data and mining data for students,
yeah,
it causes a lot of problems.
yeah,
So I'm sorry if your leptospirosis test, is named lepto horse, whatever,
yeah,
and you would like it renamed.
yeah,
The reality is that test name was set up decades ago, and that's what we use. And we're going to keep it even though you don't like it, because we need to be able to compare multiple years worth of data.
yeah, yeah.
You
In the
know,
grand scheme, I think it'll be okay.
yeah, it's not like the public is reading the test name.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
reporting it out as leptospirosis.
exactly.
They know what we're talking about. We didn't give them the short name, so uh,
So I was curious when I came out and started, I felt like bovine leukemia testing was underrepresented in my area for a variety of reasons. And I was happy of the top three counties, or well, okay, the highest number in the top three counties. Pendleton County, where I'm at, was in that list, and I'm like, okay, good. I'm testing.
yes,
And Harrison County was next. I know Harrison County has a lot of cattle producers in it as well. And then I think Lincoln County. I don't. I assume I've driven through Lincoln County once, but who knows?
yes.
So is that something? Is it everywhere in the state? You mentioned earlier 10 to 15%, but I'm like, we're finding those high numbers. Are other vets not testing, or is it higher in one region versus another? Do you?
Well, Pendleton, Harrison, Lincoln, those are some of the biggest cattle counties. Okay.
Mhm.
But the reality is, you guys are doing way better testing, but using us.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not that it's not happening
Yeah.
everywhere else. It's,
It might.
if we're testing,
Yeah.
we report it and you'll see it.
Yeah.
Uh, Reality is this is one of those things where there's multiple things at play.
Yeah.
They're not using us for
Hmm.
their testing. So we have no idea how much they're testing for it or what their results are, because they
Hmm.
didn't use us, or they're diagnosing it themselves
Yeah.
house,
Yeah.
and we have no idea how to represent that.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, if you've got the money to buy the kit and you've
You're,
got the personnel, you can run it in house.
yeah.
The reality is, though, is if you're running it in house, has your person been proficiency tested?
Hmm.
Is test being performed correctly?
Yeah.
What is your rate of testing appropriately with the correct answer?
Yeah.
Our people have to go through that,
Yeah.
and they don't get to fail it.
Quality assurance.
Yeah, you redo it until you are proficient.
Yeah.
Realistically, maybe there's a handful of vets that are doing in-house testing.
Hmm.
To me, it seems more like one of the cases of, I send this out because I send everything else out. You
Yeah.
know, I don't deal with UK or Breathitt unless I've got a dead animal and I need a pathologist to
Yeah.
do their thing. And I get it, you
Yeah.
know, like you say though, it looks like BLV is not a big issue in a lot of the state, and that's just because we're not getting the testing numbers
Yeah.
to accurately reflect what's going on.
Well, and I'd say my biggest issue, I think whatever I've reported is low
Yeah,
because I talk to clients and say, I want to use this sick cow that I'm seeing as a sentinel animal. I
yeah,
just want to run a blood test and check for things that could be in the herd. And even though I've tested some entire herds, most of the time when I tell them and explain the disease because their one animal was positive, I know others are positive in that herd,
yeah,
but we don't proceed further for a variety of issues. And that's
yeah.
that's been frustrating on my side because I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm. It kind of, I kind of like seeing these maps because I'm like, look, something mattered here, because
Yeah,
I didn't feel like I was helping curb this disease, and it was nice to see that at least I'm adding to a statistic somewhere.
exactly. Well, the reality is that helps us to, it lets us know what is going on. You know, if it looks like nothing's going on, the state is not going to allocate any money to fighting it, you know? So without an accurate picture of what is actually going on, things will suffer eventually at some
Yeah.
point.
First, I want to thank our guest, Dr. Jacqueline Smith, for talking with us about all this information. We're going to take a short break and then we're going to come back for our next episode. And our conversation will continue talking about some of the disease maps and diseases that we're dealing with, but we're also going to go into some conversations about the shortage of large animal vets and how these maps are affected by large animal veterinarians and or veterinarians in general. So please join us again. I think this is some really interesting information to go over. If you have questions, you can reach out to Dr. Smith about the maps at the University of Kentucky. If you're interested in more of this, stay tuned for next time and we'll get you some more information. I'm Dr. Nathan. Thanks for listening. I hope our discussions are valuable to you and aid in giving perspective. If you want to contact us, please reach out to theveterinarypodcast@gmail.com. You can find a complete list of the podcast episodes on SoundCloud. If you find this information helpful and want more content, please join our Patreon, patreon.com/theveterinarypodcast. And don't forget to follow our Facebook page, facebook.com/theveterinarypodcast. As always, thanks for listening, and I hope this information is helpful to you. If you do find it helpful, please like it, share it, so other people may find it helpful as well.